Deep thinking, a different way to see yourself. What are we really looking for? Søren Kierkegaard once said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." We map out our lives, set goals, follow advice, and chase clarity. But deep down, we often feel directionless. Not because the world is too big, but because we haven't yet asked what really matters to us. So we keep moving, even when something inside whispers, "This isn't it." And maybe the reason we feel lost isn't lack of effort, but the absence of an inner compass. First, we've been taught to plan before we understand ourselves. Second, we chase what others value, hoping it will eventually feel right. And third, we mistake constant movement for meaningful progress. Even when each step leaves us more uncertain, if we never stop to ask what truly resonates, we might end up somewhere successful, but far from where we were meant to be. So now, what if you asked yourself, are you chasing your future or just running from noise? What if the life you're building doesn't feel like yours?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
What makes a civilization mature? Arnold Toynbee once said, "Civilizations die from suicide, not by murder." We often measure progress by how high we build, how fast we grow, how far we reach. But is that real maturity? A person isn't considered wise just for gaining power, but for using it with care. Maybe what we call advancement for societies isn't real progress at all, just accelerating blindly toward future we never stop to define. And maybe the real issue is that we've forgotten to ask where we're going. First, we've equated growth with goodness. More expansion, more speed, more reach, always more. Second, we prize innovation but rarely ask who it serves. Does our progress protect people or just impress them? And third, when momentum becomes the goal, we risk forgetting what truly matters. If we define success by size alone, we may build endlessly, while quietly eroding the soul of what we build for. So now, what if you asked yourself, are we truly building a future worth living in? And if so, what kind of future would actually be worth wanting?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
What future are we choosing? Zygmunt Bauman once wrote, "Progress is not inevitable. It depends on the choices we make and the responsibilities we accept." We often imagine the future as something that arrives on its own, shaped by time rather than intention. But in truth, it is quietly shaped by habits, trends, and unnoticed decisions. We are not just witnesses to change, we are builders, even when we don't realize what we're building. And maybe the real issue is that we've forgotten to ask where we're going. First, we've equated growth with goodness. More expansion, more speed, more reach, always more. Second, we prize innovation but rarely ask who it serves. Much of our progress seems designed more to impress than to protect. And third, when momentum becomes the goal, we risk forgetting what truly matters. If we define success by size alone, we may build endlessly while losing what we built for. So now, what if you asked yourself, do you always choose in ways that build the world you want? If the future matched your vision, would you like what you see?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
What is justice in the global order? John Rawls once wrote, "Justice is the first virtue of institutions, since unjust systems cannot be considered legitimate. But what happens when those institutions operate on a global scale? World leaders often speak of peace and fairness. Yet the world we see is shaped by war victories, colonial legacies, and economic hierarchies. In international arenas, the loudest voices dominate, while smaller nations struggle to be heard. Is that what justice should sound like? And maybe this is where our definition of justice begins to fray. First, the concept of justice in global politics is rarely applied universally. Second, it often becomes selective, protecting the strong while silencing the weak. And third, a rule that benefits one nation may damage another, and yet it is still called international law. When the global order is structured by those with the most power, neutrality becomes questionable. Can a world designed by a few ever truly serve everyone? So now, what if you asked yourself, what does real justice look like beyond borders and flags? Can smaller nations find fairness in a system designed by the powerful?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Would you share your wealth? Adam Smith once wrote, "No society can surely be flourishing and happy, of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable. Many say, if I become rich, I will give back someday. Yet wealth is often imagined as a finish line, a point where generosity suddenly begins. But choices are already visible now. How we share time, who we help, and whether we act only when abundance arrives. And maybe the real issue is that we believe generosity begins later, once we have enough. First, we mistake imagined wealth for proof of future virtue. Second, modern capitalism praises giving only when it is public, when names appear on plaques and donations become headlines. And third, everyday life reveals our gap. Like when we say we will give someday, yet avoid helping someone already within reach. In the end, generosity postponed slowly disappears. What we delay often becomes what we never choose. So now, what if you asked yourself, if you became wealthy, would you leave everything only to your family? How much would you give away for the public good?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Is your lifestyle what you believe? Mahatma Gandhi once said, "Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony." We like to believe our lives match our values, yet lifestyle often drifts while belief stays on paper. Our habits quietly reveal what we truly prioritize. The choices we repeat quietly become our real confession. Before asking what we believe, we might ask what our daily life already says. And maybe the real issue is that we treat belief as intention, not direction. First, we assume feeling strongly is the same as living differently. Second, modern life rewards performance, where we post convictions, but keep the same patterns because change feels inconvenient. And third, misalignment hides in ordinary days, like when we say relationships matter most, yet always let work win one more time. In the end, a lifestyle that contradicts our beliefs slowly teaches us not to trust ourselves. So now, what if you asked yourself, what part of your lifestyle would change if belief truly led you? If you lived exactly as you believe, what would change first?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Should power accumulate private wealth? Lord Acton once warned, Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We often think power is about responsibility and service, a position meant to protect public interests. But power also brings access, influence, and long-term opportunity. Over time, the line between public duty and private benefit can quietly blur. When power lasts long enough, accumulation can start to feel normal and deserved. What begins as authority slowly invites personal reward. And maybe the real issue is not corruption, but normalization. First, systems allow wealth to grow legally alongside political power. Second, transparency becomes selective, framed as privacy or technical complexity. And third, public attention drifts away from gradual accumulation over time. Scandals fade, but assets remain. Rules are followed, yet public trust erodes quietly. What looks acceptable on paper often feels wrong in lived reality. In the end, power stops serving the public and starts protecting what it has gained. So now, what if you asked yourself, is political power meant to serve the public or personal wealth? At what point did we accept power being used for private gain?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Do humans decide who we become? Francis Fukuyama once wrote, "What is at stake is the very grounding of our moral choices." For most of history, humans accepted life as something received, not designed. Limits were given by nature, chance, or fate. Today, science allows us to intervene at the very beginning of life. Through editing and selection, as creation shifts into human hands, a deeper question emerges. Are we deciding who we become, or simply assuming that right? And maybe the real issue is not possibility, but authority. First, there is no historical precedent for humans redesigning humanity itself. Second, the power to decide what counts, as better is unevenly distributed. And third, the consequences of these choices cannot be reversed. Once lives exist, technology moves forward while ethical agreement lags behind. What begins as healing risks turning into selection? We hesitate not because the tools are lacking, but because no shared standard tells us when to stop. So now, what if you asked yourself, who gets to decide that humans can redesign life? When things go wrong, who takes responsibility for the lives created?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Does progress require sacrifice? Walter Benjamin once wrote, "Progress is a storm that drives us into the future, while debris piles up behind us." We often speak of progress as something purely positive, a forward movement that promises improvement, growth, and hope. But progress rarely arrives without cost. Some people work longer and sacrifice more to keep progress moving. Loss is reframed as necessity, and progress continues. Over time, sacrifice stops sounding like a choice and begins to feel expected. And maybe the real issue is not sacrifice itself, but how easily it is justified. First, progress is often described in abstract terms, detached from personal cost. Second, sacrifice is framed as temporary, even when its effects are lasting. And third, those who benefit most from progress rarely bear the heaviest losses. The burden is quietly shifted in the name of responsibility or resilience. People are praised for enduring rather than questioning. The cost of progress is absorbed unevenly and rarely reconsidered. So now, what if you asked yourself, Would you willingly accept sacrifice in the name of progress? Was that your decision or something you felt pushed into?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper. If you took a moment to reflect, that's already enough. See you in the next one.